Hello, it's December 15th, 2022. We're having our final knowledge engineering meeting. And Peter and Carl here, others may join in. Today, we're going to look over where/how we've gotten and set some directions for 23 and see what we can get done while we're here. Welcome, Chris. Just to begin with, before we kind of bring in the 23 directions and reviews and everything, anything that anybody wants to add related to knowledge engineering?
Yeah.
Yes, go for it.
The European Union for Systemics, EUS, and the Hellenic Society for Systems Sciences have undertaken a digital archiving project, and I haven't looked at it yet, but I do want to bring it into our awareness. And in particular, they're using the MIT DSpace process for the way that they put their material together. And so I am interested in how we might become more aware of that and see if it's applicable to what we want to do. There you go. I haven't looked at it yet. I just learned about this today when I was giving a presentation at their conference. So that's one topic. Yeah, so those two things are related. So that would be good. And the other topic is that I'm leading the working group for the American Society for Cybernetics on their archive project. And there has been interest in a Paskian, Gordon Pask interface to archives. And Paul Pangaro, who's the current president of the American Society for Cybernetics, feels there may be an opportunity to get funding for that. And I'm interested in others' opinion about that possibility, and particularly seeking maybe funding from the National Science Foundation or other places for that kind of activity, which would apply not only to the cybernetic records. And Paul's had some discussion with this with the archivists at the University of Vienna, who have much of the cybernetic record. Anyway, so those are the topics which I've gone on a bit too more, but those are the two things that I'd like to put on the agenda.
All right, awesome. Yeah, that's a lot to consider.
Yeah.
Carl or Chris want to raise anything? Otherwise, I think there's some we can return. Okay. All right. Coarsely, we have other archival efforts in the space.
Right.
Which would include this, but also other areas, as well as the Active Inference Journal and all the work that Dave has done. Then there is something like the working products or services of knowledge engineering able to be interfaced with by education, but presenting that interface. Like, we can't just make a database and say, all right, make curriculum. Knowledge engineering needs to meet education at the interface.
Mm-hmm.
Something like, at the very least, a search, but something potentially more like a semantic search or like a conversational search or intercourse would be more immediately taken up by our educational attention. So
Well, related to that is the whole question of tagging and mapping, which I know you've done a lot on. So um, that's another topic for us to consider is how you go about tagging documents, if tagging is indeed the answer. I don't know. Yeah. I mean, from a knowledge engineering point of view, this issue of tagging is quite complex. In fact, my son is working for a company that's doing it. Um, it's not an easy topic. Facebook have tried, for example, within the context of hate speech, and how do you determine what hate speech actually is, and how do you tag it? Or then how do you even then go about training something to automatically tag things? So you're getting into some real challenging programming and human and machine issues. Not that we want to get derailed by that, but at least to be aware of it. Maybe make a contribution. I don't know.
all right, let's look to education just for a second, just for a little context, and then come back here. This is where we left off in the final education meeting, just to think about where these two threads will be taking us. So because we kind of are in tandem with both. In knowledge engineering, from the education side, we wanted to focus on archiving, publishing, indexing, digitization, using MediaWiki and other affordances and other systems, considering it as an enabling system for education. And then on the education side, have a few different possible foci. One of them will be to communicate with all of the people who've been have already identified interest, as well as probably to all ISSS members, and just ask, like, how can education services be useful for you in 23, and do you want to be involved in any extent in terms of like internal educational functions, and then which could include like archiving and documenting the symposia and all these or increasing the impact of somebody's educational efforts. And then on the external education side, there's a few directions. We discussed some external facing education work, like standard settings, curriculum, partnerships, and Don has written an open letter, which I'll put in the chat because he added this just a few days ago, but it's very worth a read. So that was kind of where we got to in education for 2023 directions. But so now let's kind of turn back to knowledge engineering and think, like, with education, and I hope more people will join into education so that more of these facets can be fleshed out, and so people can just like find a home for projects that they're already working on. Now, what could knowledge engineering be and do in that setting? One component is the fundamentals of digitization for ISSS. An overlapping area, like we neither want to take on the digitization challenges of others, nor wait for them to figure out their situation before we proceed, but like somewhere in the middle is going to be making sure that our fundamentals of storage, like the documents and archives that ISSS owns, and also the sort of like periphery, like documents which potentially are not ISSS products, but are like relevant or mentioned and all of this, that on that front, we remain connected with other archival efforts in the space. And then to make all of this useful and actionable, we have the development of some interfaces. Some perhaps more like a traditional database with search, others potentially using large language models, some kind of chat interface. Though in Coda, I use I use GPT-3 in the tabular form, which is extremely powerful, and it isn't like chatty, but in some ways it's even more powerful because you can combinatorically synthesize prompts.
So you're saying that within Coda, we might be able to work within Coda to do that. Is that what you're putting forward?
Yes, like all the out of the box package is just like uses GPT-3, and on the same one that you would get I don't know if the exact same one that is in Chat GPT, but functionally the same.
Mhm.
Then the question of like how to interface with a custom trained language model. So we have one element is custom corpus. Another, so and then disjoint from that is language models that are structured with formal knowledge models. So the custom corpus would be trained on the word patterns of systems. So like the words it's using and the co-occurrences and the sentence structure and so on would be reflecting the corpus in structure. But the semantics would not necessarily just as it is now. Like the semantics are not necessarily accurate. It just sort of sounds accurate. The angle that I'm very excited about, which is going to be I'll put the link here in the chat. It's going to be a live stream in the beginning of January. This is with Adam Peace, who is the developer of the suggested upper merged ontology Sumo. And Sumo is a logical ontology that's declared as a program. It has a few very interesting features that other ontological schemes don't. And it allows large language models to be trained on formal knowledge structures. That's one way. Also, people are taking other approaches so that the semantics of what it generates, because like, I mean, you don't want to be in a conversation with AI Gordon Pask and have it. This is going to be the whole question with what these models output. which is if the vigilance and the expertise required to disambiguate what it says is high, then there's literally no point. And if the error rate is 5% semantically, is that okay? What if the error rate is, 25% semantically? So what are people really looking to get from such a model? Those are really important questions that could be sketched, if not fully fleshed, potentially even with a working group or a research paper on like systems and large language models, and strike while the iron is hot, integrate systems thinking into this rapidly growing area. So perhaps knowledge engineering can also have a internal ISSS focus and an external collaborative focus, where our in knowledge engineering capacity, our internal focus, of course, should keep collaborative interoperability in mind. But I think we, especially in the simply acquiring and securing the ISSS catalog, there's already enough there that we don't need any external referent. But we'll want to make sure that we're using standard practices in all of these things. But like, this is going to be a specific ISSS internal task. And then the slightly slower moving, or potentially, who knows, maybe people get super excited about this kind of work in 2023. But the slightly slower moving train, but the one that we ultimately want to weave, is at the timeline of organizational partnerships and funding support for research and development related to corpus integration and semantic use of large systems and cybernetics databases, which is what we saw a little bit of with Rob's presentation with the systems community repository. And like these.
Can I just give a quick update on that?
Yeah, please.
So I think at the last meeting that I attended, where I presented that presentation, there was an action on me to supply Peter and a few others with my up-to-date listing of the ISSS collections. And I've spent the last 3 or 4 weeks doing that, updating a dozen or so worksheets of all the conferences and the videos. And I'm just about very close to sending that out to you, Peter. So hopefully that should be with you in the next few days.
Wow, thank you.
Awesome. Yeah, what has that been like, or like what has been the scope or interesting about it?
The bulk of the work was just indexing all the various items within each collection, mainly going through all the members' lists of all the conferences and the proceedings that came out of the occasional ones, all the general systems yearbooks, all the general systems bulletins as well, all the videos that Peter's been putting up, and a lot more have been put up since I last trawled through them, probably a year ago. All the mini symposiums, I've now got a list of all of those
Wow.
with some basic information. It's probably replicated in what list Peter has. But at least, one value is that it's all on one spreadsheet now with multiple worksheets in it, and it's hopefully searchable. And I'm very much would like to sort of engage with ISSS to feedback on how useful it is and what can be done to make it more useful, because hopefully the same format will be done for a lot of the other collections from other organizations that I've got. And just an add-on as well, drilling down into the general systems yearbooks, I will send that as a separate spreadsheet as well, and that's an index of all the articles in all 32 yearbooks, at least a first attempt at it.
That's epic.
I'll send a copy to you as well, Daniel, and then you can decide where to put it or what to do with it between yourselves as a team.
Awesome. Wow. So let's imagine it's the beginning of January. We're setting off on a ISSS introspection, interoception work, possibly also associated with another email to query the members if they're interested. I feel like, especially if they hear about like the updates that you just shared, Rob, just like the scope and the type of the remembering that can happen, I think that should really activate some people if we can think of what tasks people can do with the documentation of the catalog as it will stand. Like, what can people do? Can they obtain the full text of materials, or like where would you see other people in the ISSS with or without like sort of personal tacit experience? How could someone else contribute to
that? I mean, just my own thoughts is from what ISSS brings to the table in any of these discussions and networking, I think is its internal repository and its breadth of knowledge. And the other one is a bit more intangible. It's a general theory which might pull all this together, but let's leave that one aside for now. I think the accessibility involves searching for it, and I think an index or a catalog will help with that. Peter's doing a grand job of digitizing things and putting them on the ISSS website, so it's almost like a library model. It's there for people and researchers to access. I think in terms of activities, there's no shortage of ideas of what could be done with this repository that's so rich in so many treasures. I think Peter found one by Roger Cavello, which is a review of the state of the ISSS from how many decades ago it was, and there's so much treasure in there. So there's no shortage of projects you could propose to people or engage people in. The trouble is, of course, is that there's no significant funding or body of personnel behind all of this. It's all volunteers. So I don't know if we can, ISSS can set a strategy of things it wants to deliver in 2023 in a program of deliverables, or whether it's just going to be whoever engages in it. So those are just my broad thoughts on it, really.
Yeah, I think, Robert, the way that ISSS currently operates is that would be challenging in any timely manner. And I think that we now have 1, 2, 3, 4, there's 5 of us on this call, and that we could, between us, probably come up with some form of proposal to some funding agency that might be able to fund some activities, whether they're here in the United States or in the UK, given that you've got 2 of you from the UK on here. And Carl might even have some suggestions. I don't know that GSA funds this kind of thing, but I'm more familiar with National Science Foundation, as is Danielle. So coming up with a project scope would probably be the first step, like a 1-pager on what we would propose and what we might think we need in this regard. And certainly, there's collaborators with the American Society for Cybernetics who'd be interested in perhaps combining forces to make a stronger proposal.
I'm more cautious. I'm a great believer in starting small, improving ourselves, and then working our way up.
Yeah.
Walking before we run, and the organizational maturity of the ISSS has to be developed before we can start, taking on bigger projects.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. I mean, I wasn't necessarily suggesting that. What I was suggesting, I suppose, is that between us, not necessarily trying to engage the management and board of directors and so on with ISSS, which I think would get bogged down in organizational inertia and focus, but maybe between us, that even as you suggest, that some small project with a small amount of funding that's just between I mean, Daniel has avenues through UC Davis, I have avenues through my own not-for-profit. I have a small business in the UK, which is another avenue that has received EU funding, at least, so has some a small grant from the US Embassy. I'm just saying that we could explore avenues that might produce even a small amount of funding to do whatever it is we think we might want to do on a small basis.
That sounds sensible. It would maybe make a change for this group if they're going to commit to strategic initiatives rather than a more free-flowing format.
Well, yes, I think, I mean, I'm not getting any younger, and I do feel a certain urgency about action. You're taking action, which is wonderful. I'm doing what I can within the resources and time I have available. But, if we had a more, and that's not to say we wouldn't involve ISSS. I mean, ISSS could, in a way, be, as an organization, could be more of a sort of put their name to it, but it would be one of our own organizations that would perhaps take the lead.
Yeah,
is what I'm saying, or a combination thereof. And that's just my thinking is, College of Exploration, UC Davis, whatever in the UK. Anyway.
Agreed, yeah.
Yeah, this is really important discussions. One thought, and I think one that serves like that performs the groundwork and builds momentum, is like, with those who are interested in knowledge engineering and education at ISSS and potentially our colleagues, like, system science or whatever, whatever the systems community, whatever is here, but system science. And just reintroduce and sketch the opportunity and the value of, and the also the urgency of this kind of digitization, scholarship, and education. Go for this in the first 3 or 4 months of the year. Include it in the communication to the ISSS members. Just say we have a few different initiatives on both education and knowledge engineering. There will be and again, just totally speculating here, but we also are going to co-author this paper. Here's the catechism. It is going to happen on this date, and that is going to be like conceptually and the personnel perspective, carrying out some of the groundwork for a future grant application. And then like in the grant application, of course, it's like these people are already like working together, and the ways of working are important. We just it's completed, but the deadline is tomorrow for the NSF cyber infrastructure
I saw
grant.
that.
Yeah. So we completed the work there. It's on content addressable infrastructure. I would be able, under that grant, if we get it, to like literally do this work. But at the very least, even if we don't get it, I have a better sense of how to position cyber infrastructural proposals.
Is it possible you could share that proposal, or is it
let me ask.
Yeah, just within our group,
Yeah.
Yeah, ask the group, see what they think.
I will I'll just ask RJ.
Yeah, or if he wants to come, or even you could invite him to this group just to give us a sense of how you're approaching it, which is a form of education for those of us on the call, right? About how, at least within the US funding system, these cyber infrastructure funding avenues present themselves. I found another one that's interesting about building the American infrastructure. Cyber, well, it's talking about
this is the program.
Yeah, no, well, that's the one you've done, but there's one that
Yeah.
came out yesterday called Strengthening American Infrastructure, which is interesting because the word infrastructure. Yeah, I can put the thing in the chat if you want. You can find it probably pretty quick. But the thing that's interesting is the term infrastructure. That's in the chat.
Okay.
Yeah. Chris put some good points in the chat there.
Yeah. Yeah. This. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I mean, like.
I mean, it could be cyber, it could be infrastructure for STEM education, for example.
That's also like one clear task is to document and understand the stages and the difference, like possible collaborators, many of whom are specifically even already shown here.
But even if we changed our language from knowledge engineering and education to building cyber infrastructure for systems education or systems literacy, might be an interesting reframe.
Yeah, that's very true. Yeah, just infrastructure.
Yeah, well, the idea of cyber infrastructure. Well, yeah, so infrastructure, because the way they're using the word infrastructure is interesting because it's stimulate human-centered, fundamental, and potentially transformative research aimed at strengthening America's infrastructure. And when they talk about infrastructure, they don't talk only about physical
Yeah.
objects. They're talking about intellectual objects and conceptual objects as well. And so it's an interesting kind of expansion of the term infrastructure, which I've always let to think of wires and computers, but they're talking about a kind of, and indeed, it might even be interesting to explore whether there's any UK-US collaborative possibilities through foundations or whatever, because from time to time, NSF does. Well, there's another one on collaborative networks, which we came across, which would be another one that is in fact encourages international cooperation. So that's another potential, is that we could have an international research network on cyber infrastructure or infrastructure. Maybe take the word cyber, or cyber and human. Maybe if we put cyber and human together would be better, because we're talking about, I mean, so often humans get left out of these conversations.
Yeah.
Where Carl's going with his PhD. So,
infrastructure. I mean, it's a cyber also kind of ties it back to cybernetics, which is funny, of course.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Sometimes it loses the humanness about it.
Yeah. I mean, that would be the long arc.
Yeah, I know.
From cyber can if the paths and the meanings split, we had our dark night of the digital soul, and now we are coming back together with practices and patterns.
Yeah. I want Chris to say something. He's been typing away here, and
to leave soon because it's supper time. But I really like. I wrote down humanness. I think that's quite important, and that's what I can do in this group, is help nudge towards humanness in terms of its natural and intuitive, the way things are organized, as opposed to just a bunch of stuff that's categorized.
Good.
So no, I like the points. That's where I'm on.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks, Carl, for that reference too.
Okay, it's the same file.
Did you get that? Yeah, there you go.
Yeah. And also NIST.
Yeah.
Brings us back to the earlier discussion on the standards.
Oh, yes.
I mean, and at some point, to do the SCA collaboration,
what's
to
that?
have
SCA?
The systems community.
Oh, sorry. Right.
Yeah.
Alliance.
Yeah, alliance. Yeah.
Oh, right. Systems.
Yeah.
Systems Community Alliance.
Thank you, Chris. Farewell. We'll be in touch.
Yes. Have a good. Yeah.
Yes.
Merry Christmas, Chris. We'll see you next.
Yeah.
But to enable even one, let alone two, there has to be some kind of standards.
Yeah. Well, that's another question. It might be very interesting. And have I brought up the ISO and the International Standards Organization? Did I bring that up?
We talked about it in
we did last week.
Education.
Yeah. But NIST and standards is good too. I mean, that's interesting.
Yep, we even talked about NIST.
Maybe they have funding.
It would be very interesting to work on the infrastructural knowledge engineering dimension and think about standards of storage, interoperability, accessibility, tagging, etc., and then treat that as an enabling standard for educational systems curricula, which I think on one hand there's more activity in that area, but also there's more perspectives for better and context for better and for worse. And everyone, I think, has like their own way on like how to learn and teach systems, yet we don't have as much, obviously, standards on the materials.
Mm.
What would standards look like in our context?
For the knowledge engineering side,
Yes.
some type of not knowing exactly, just totally speculating, of course. Some type of technical specification that would reference other technical specifications. It's not like we need to reinvent the PDF or anything, but that would describe a systems cyber infrastructural protocol, such that a group that we're not in contact with could take on the standard and engineer a system to be compatible with standard 9000 ISSS. And if they were to develop their system according to that scheme, it would have interoperability or hot swappability or some other high reliability in the context of the SCA.
Okay.
Which would be really a good sort of really massive ticket for ISSS if it could award some kind of systemic certification process for standard adherence in the documentation of systems work.
I'm remembering Chan's coupled human and natural systems, which seemed to be a big area of funding around about 2000, and some communities developed around that. But the idea of it is the concept of coupling human and natural systems and cyber systems together in actual life or in ontologies. Yeah, some certification around that would be interesting.
All right. So in our closing 10 minutes, let's
Wow.
let's what?
We have fun.
We have fun. Let's just review like sort of knowledge engineering. Okay. It's not explicitly mentioned in the ISSS bylaws in the same way that education is so heavily referenced. However, reading between the lines, it is the enabling system for all education and other informational functionalities. So it's like part of our work and contribution to the ISSS to develop this project. We connected with a few dozen people. We connected with more people in the education side, probably because it's more salient and close to people's experience. And also I like kind of reached out more on social media, but we connected with different people who at the very least have insights to provide, if not like want to help more actively. We had only 8 meetings, but we had many good discussions, and obviously great work was done by people here and elsewhere to reckon with the ISSS's current catalog, as well as to get our footing for how we'll head into 23. We did not develop an explicit strategy at really any scale, with all the pros and cons of being kind of strategy free. However, I think looking back on this last quarter, during this opening round of like our collaboration, and also just like my work in this position, we brought a lot on the table. And so like within 23, we definitely should be able to create a lot more working products. I'm personally always excited by the opportunity to like bring together a rapid emergent team with diverse backgrounds to create a paper that is like valuable for everybody and also moves the discussion forward and serves as grounding for future work. Some of the most interesting, I think, deep topics were like, how does system science feed back into how we organize the information? Unresolved topic, but like very interesting. Do we need to use Mobus's systemes, and how do we deal with the plurality of systems ontologies and other relevant schemes that come into play? And for example, like recognize the different ways that people might use even the same term, like system or anything else, like highlighting the differences, but also understanding, using the same word and all the like harmonies and disharmonies in our syntax and semantics that make the system science corpus arguably uniquely interesting. We explored a few software threads. Giannis created a media wiki, which could be developed for certain functions in the coming year. We also played around and interacted with our FedWiki colleagues, and I have a FedWiki, played around a little bit. It's an interesting architecture, and then that brings us basically to here, where I in the coming like weeks before we begin in 23, I'll try to perhaps write summaries of what happened in education and knowledge engineering, state of the ISSS education VP missive, and also just solicit another round of interest, and set our internal and collaborative directions so that each of us, the outcomes that are valuable, which will vary between just the pure experience, the pure knowledge. Some people may be seeking a part-time funding, authorship on papers, that what people want to get out of this volunteer opportunity can be provided by the ISSS. Any closing thoughts?
Well, just thank you, Daniel, for your initiative here and doing all this work to record it, bring us together. Thank you.
Yes, sounds very good and very hopeful.
On a logistical note, do we still want to alternate meetings at the same time like, is there a modified time in 23 that would be like more convenient for people? Other than 19 UTC, like 11 a.m. Pacific.
It's okay for me, and I'm happy with this pace.
All right.
I have the ISSS book club, which meets on once a month. I think it's the third Thursday. So I might be late to some meetings, or I might have to bow out early from that previous meeting. But it's not too inconvenient, but there might be that slight overlap.
Is it after or before, Rob?
It's before, and it doesn't meet every month. We have breaks, it's term based almost. Okay, but it's in the calendar, isn't it? Sorry, Carl.
Yeah, the SIEL SIG, we're talking about meeting basically right after this on the last Thursdays of the month too. So this is a good time for me. I got my primary team meeting is the previous hour and stuff. So this
awesome. Okay, we will retain the Thursday at 19 UTC. The first meeting of 23 is going to be education on January 5th. And then we will alternate and be like actionable, but also relatively open at these meetings. And those will be the ones that like everybody will be recurrently asked to join. So we may expect like new people to join those, and then we'll drill down and have co-working, but primarily asynchronous contributions or other sessions on a more initiative basis. Well, thank you, fellows. It was a great year. Really happy to be collaborating with everybody.
Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you.
Excellent.
All right.
Yeah.
Very well.
Yeah, and have a good Christmas. We don't see each other beforehand.
Peace, everyone.